We take lateness for the rest of them, or just wait? They'll just turn up.
Yeah, we'll just wait and see. I guess with technology, sometimes it can be challenging for people.
It can, yeah. Okay. So, as far as I'm aware, there's no extraordinary business coming up. So, if anyone's got anything, they can we'll do it at the end of the meeting.
But the paper that we've just received from the Head Canterbury Catchment Collective, will we do that at the end of the meeting, or maybe when I do my update around that time?
We'll do it at the end, Dave. We'll just give people a chance to read it.
Yep. Cool.
We'll have a few minutes for that. Register of interest is there. I see it's been updated by a few people, so that's good. Everyone's keeping on top of it. Confirmation of the minutes. I think, Carol, you've got an amendment.
Bill, sorry, can I just jump back to the register of interest? Can we just ask Carol to put my 3 or 4 on there? I think I sent them through just after the last meeting.
Okay.
Carol.
Yeah, if you're not there.
Apologies, James, you actually did. I've put them on the register, but I just didn't put them in the minutes. So it is updated, but I will get that officially put in the minutes. And there is one amendment that Sydney declared a conflict of interest in the Hekioa Hines Water Enhancement Trust agenda item at the last meeting and didn't take part in the discussion. So I'm just going to add that into the minutes as well.
Okay. So we realised that Dave and Carol and I had seen Sydney move to the side of the meeting, so I'll move that we accept that amendment to the minutes. Our seconder.
Yes.
Thanks, James. All in favour? Aye. Pass. Carried. That's good. So the minutes have been circulated, and I take them as a true and accurate record of the meeting. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder for that, please?
Yeah, I can do that, Bill.
Thanks, Ian. Everyone's going to have to participate, or it's going to be quite a painful meeting. Okay, so that's the minutes done. Right, next is what's next? Correspondence. What have we got, Dave?
No correspondence, Bill.
What about that that we note that we got from?
Oh yes, from Jude.
Yes,
Jude,
yes.
We could either do that as correspondence. We could do that if you like.
Have you got it in your report? Have you?
I haven't added it in because we just got it yesterday, but I could talk about it in the report.
Okay, we'll do it in the report. Yep.
Okay.
We'll do that. Be real good. No other correspondence for anyone. But hard to have a public contribution, I suppose, at the moment. We're not aware of anything.
No.
So we'll get on to the first main item, and that's the Water Trust. Is that correct, Dave?
Yep. We'd like to welcome Brett Painter. Brett, I can see is online. So Brett, do you want to take over and share your screen or whatever you want to do?
Sure thing. Kia ora koutou. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Brent. Thanks for your good report. Nice pictures and everything in it.
Great. I'm glad you've read it, Bill. That means you'll have the best questions.
Yeah. So away you go, please.
So I'm joined by Peter Lowe, Chair, and Rab McDowell, Trustee today. Just sharing my screen at the moment. I will have my chat on, and we'll be able to see hands as well. So feel free to stop me at any time. I propose not to read everything out for you, just assume that you've had a read and have some questions as I go through, if that's all right, Bill.
That sounds good, Brent. It'll be good.
Great. Okay. So presuming you can see my change to second slide now, we all go?
Yep. Good at my end.
Fantastic. Okay. So this shouldn't be news to any of you. There are a bunch of actions underway from around the catchment, both to reduce, recycle and rehabilitate the catchment, I'm just noting in the slide that the trust is focused on the latter half, the recycle and rehabilitate, but we obviously remain significantly interested in all the others, and in fact with my other ECAN hat on, I am involved in the others as well, so that links across to this. No hands popping up, so I'm presuming that all makes sense. You will have seen graphs like this before. So in blue, we have the annual median nitrate concentration. This is a July to June one, so midwinter to midwinter, so it looks a bit different from the calendar years. And this is using the bores that were part of the Plan Change 2 initial assessments. The bores that they're using have changed slightly since last year because there was an error in PC2 regarding the definition of these bores. It was supposed to be within 30 metres of the water table rather than within 30 metres of the ground level. So it's changed things ever so slightly. We're going at the moment to June 2021. Obviously, we're still in the middle of the following year, which is going to look a lot different from this. The really good news here is that this is the lowest the lowest annual median concentration since 2010. So since the beginning of the water management strategy. Bill, your hand's up.
Yeah, Brent, can you just confirm this for some of the meeting too? Just the levels of the bore. What's the depth of the bores?
These are what are defined as shallow bores in Plan Change 2. Right. And so in Plan Change 2 itself, it still says within 30 metres of the ground, but it was actually meant to read within 30 metres of the water table, right. the high water table. So what that means is that some of the bores further up catchment are included in this as they were in the PC2 assessments. Otherwise, you only have lower catchment bores, and we're going to wait for years for the nutrients to come on down and see them. So this is a better representation of what's going on. So the red line at the top is 11.3. That's the current drinking water limit. The black line down here is the current 6.9 target for 2035 through Plan Change 2. The up and down orange line is the annual rainfall at the Ashburton station. And we know that the 2021 rainfall, so that picked up the first couple of days of the heavy rain event. Otherwise, we would have been in a dry year. So I'm just noting up the top that there are three key factors here in the nutrient measurements that we're seeing, the rainfall in the year, what's happening on land with regard to managing nutrients, and what we're doing in the catchment with managed aquifer recharge. I propose not to read through all of this. I've given you a reasonable amount of text because this work stream, which has been underway for some time, you will have heard myself and others talk about Philippa Aitchison Earle's work in identifying the sources of nutrients, nitrate in particular, but other nutrients coming down towards tinmold in the groundwater. And so we're really following up on that. So the clear opportunities are free nutrients for groundwater irrigators, and therefore potentially reduced external costs for the relevant fertiliser. But there are a number of challenges, and the further we get into this project, there will be a number of thorny questions that we need to address as we go through the work stream. But we're buoyed by what we are seeing thus far. We have two case studies in a final draft state at the moment, one of an actual dairy farm and one of a representative crop mixed cropping situation, and so we plan to take those out for consultation with groundwater irrigators as soon as COVID allows us to. Any questions on this new nutrient recycling work stream? No, makes sense. Marvellous. Okay. So 2 other work streams I'm expecting you're aware of. You've had MH3 Water coming to talk to you about their constructed wetland trial. We're obviously supporting this in any way that we can. At the moment, it doesn't include a bioreactor, but other ones may do. So the bioreactor gives you additional biological conversion of nutrients to something, for example, nitrate to nitrogen gas, and so can do in a smaller area, but you've got higher capital costs. We have looked at these in other places, and so we will be offering our support as the trial carries on and as we look at others. Likewise, the addition of solar panel power to one of the Eiffelton pumps, you'll see thus far the numbers are looking good in terms of the business case for further installations of solar power, but we're awaiting a full year of data before we sign this one off. Of course, the year from August, September 2021 to the same period in 2022 would be pretty easy to argue is not representative of the a normal year in terms of sunshine, but we do have lots of other data from nearby that we work with as well. Still seeing, oh, Bill, yes.
Sorry, I don't think I'm the only one at the meeting, Brent, but hopefully the rest will pull out and ask something. But with the O'Shaughnessy's drain project, will there be any possibility of any water coming down from the Mar scheme into that, or is that just purely irrigation water?
Yeah, great question. So when we started up our Lenny's Road Mar site, we have seen, and I touch on this later on in the lower Hinds, we've seen that water not only go down the Hinds riverbed and therefore under the riverbed, we've also seen it coming on down Swamp Road drain. So the we've seen it pop up in the springs that go down Swamp Road, which is then Taylor's, and therefore we can assume that on the true left of the lower Hikea Hinds River that there's likely to be some likely to be some of the Mar water at some stage. However, it's a pretty small part of the catchment, and there's a larger catchment that supplies O'Shaughnessy's. Now that we've got the project going there, we'll have the nutrient monitoring going there, and we'll see what we're working with. At the moment, the concentrations in that part of the catchment, say compared with Northern Drain on the other side, are relatively low. But that's why we're able to get a reasonably small constructed wetland in place, and probably not need the bioreactor. Does that answer your question, Bill?
Yeah, that's great. Very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Suspect again you're familiar with all of this. This is the currently consented sites on the left-hand side, and what we are targeting, what we designed to target with those sites, which was in particular the shallow groundwater as it upwells towards springs that feed the lowlands, the lowland waterways. The groundwater lag times, as we've talked about in the past, from further up catchment and deeper are very long, and therefore intercepting, if you like, this groundwater that's heading up towards the springs is a way that we believe we can be most efficient and effective with the water and with the sites. The Mar Race site up front, that's the site funded by Ashburton District Council on beginning of Timaru Track Road. and then the test site is actually sort of midway to Timaru Track Road, and the basin site is near the top end, shall we say, back towards the Heke Hines River along Timaru Track. So that's site 7. Sites 2, 8 and 7, if you like, from the race, the test site and the basin. We've got a few different variations on each that we're working with, again, just to understand the best type of MAR situation for where we are in the catchment, the amount of land we've got to work with, the amount of water, etc. All right, no hands, moving on. But I'm sure someone else will follow your lead at some point. So this was to the end of year 5. We're in our year 6. At the moment, you can see that for each of certainly years 2 to 5, we were able to significantly increase recharge volume. And by the end of last year, we were able to utilise most, so around about 90% of the available water through the 500 litres per second consented amount. So that's clearly the constraining factor now. You can see we had a recharge capacity just under 1,200 litres a second. We only had 500 to work with. You'll see up the top, the PC2 target set by the zone committee of the time was about 126 million cubic metres per year. We reached 13.8 last year, so just over 10% of that. So clearly a wee way to go. This year is going to be significantly less than that 13.8. The ground can't take water when it's waterlogged after heavy rainfall or in a wetter year than normal. Also, we haven't had the access to the water all the time due to storage and river flows being a constraint. So obviously after the end of this year, as in springtime, I'll be able to come back and give you an update on that.
Sorry,
you will
Brent.
have seen this. Yes.
Sorry.
Oh, Bill.
Me
Yes.
again,
Go
sorry about that. Just for everyone's knowledge, new to it, can you just remind people when you actually close the process down so there's no effect on flooding or too much water close to autumn or winter? So could you just remind how that works?
Sure. So we have a heavy rainfall event consent condition that requires us to shut down after a heavy rainfall event, and that was because of the potential. For example, you can imagine if we have a site running and then the ground gets all waterlogged, then the infiltration rates will slow down and that site could potentially overflow. And so that's what we don't want. There was some concern in the early days that we may be putting so much water in the ground that it could travel on through the groundwater system and increase drain flows and things when they're already running high. We certainly haven't seen any of that because the volume of the water that we're talking about and would ever be talking about is very small compared with the normal annual land surface recharge from rain. So it's a consent condition, and it doesn't make any sense to operate any other way. There's another hand hiding in the background.
Chris Allen, I think.
Yeah, it's Chris. Thanks, Brent. Hey, I'm sorry to break in on the Bill show, but anyhow,
But it's a coffee
4 and 5. Yeah, it's a cup of tea. Maximum total recharge flow. I think you probably need to rename that column because I looked at that earlier thinking, how can you have 500 consented, and the way I could read that you're actually putting in 1,200. But if that's the potential ability, I just think you need to change that language. Otherwise, some might think that you're doing things that are not quite right, given that there's your potential capacity.
Understood.
Is that right?
So add in the word potential between max and total. Make the table a little bit longer.
Whatever. Just
would be safer.
No, just make it your language safer, because there's your system capacity or something. I don't know, but whatever it is. But it just looks like you're allowed to take 500, but you'd be putting 1195 in. If I look at that.
Understood. Yep.
You
we'll
be as
change-
brief as you like, it just the way it looks.
Yes, I'll change those words. Thanks, Chris. Claire, hand up.
Yeah, just wondering how long the consent is for and if there's any ability to increase that flow, or is it going to be like that till 2035?
Great. So that's in a slide right near the end of the presentation. Can I answer that question then?
Yeah, sounds good.
Great, thank you. All right, any further questions? No, we'll carry on. So just wanted to bring this one. So we bring this an updated version of the slide back to you every year. The bit of interest, for those that haven't seen this before, let me just briefly explain. This site, which we call Site 1 or the pilot site, began operations in the middle of 2016. We had nitrate nitrogen of between 6 and 7 milligrams a litre, so that's across on the right-hand axis before we started. We had groundwater about 26 to 29 metres below ground, and then, so that's the blue, and then the yellow is our the flow going into the site. And so if you multiply this number by 100, as we show on the right-hand axis, you get the flow. So generally we're in between 100 and 150 litres a second going into the site. So what we can see, as soon as we turn the site on, very quickly we had what's called a pressure response. This bore's about 1 kilometre down gradient, and so the water level on the bore shot up. And since then it's stayed high, despite some reasonably dry periods, despite being turned off for long periods at the time. We haven't got back down to these low levels in terms of the groundwater level. The nitrate concentration then followed suit and dropped pretty significantly from a high of 7 down to between 2 and 3 milligrams a litre nitrogen. For a while we had a nitrate in situ groundwater sensor in there that took a measurement every 15 minutes. So that's the green line which goes up and down. We can see a rainfall event here where the nitrate went up quickly and then down again quickly. We moved that across to another part of the catchment to try and understand what was happening with other bores at the end of 2018, but we kept up with our regular, which is most months, samples. So this is the lab samples. So you'll see that when we turned off for a while, the nitrate level will go back up again. So it was below 2 and up to about 3.5, and then shoot back down again low when we turn back on again. So you can see that this well's pretty connected to the Mara, and this is the proof of concept. So just wanted to show you the latest information following the May rainfall event. So here we are, if my cursor's showing, just pre the May event, we were down at about 1.3 milligrams a litre, which is very, very low nitrate nitrogen for this groundwater. Rainfall event hit, you can see we turned off as we should have done. The nitrate level shot up to 4 according to the lab tests. May have gone a little bit higher immediately, but it was back down to 4. And then as we progressively started up, so firstly at low infiltration rates and then back a bit higher, you can see the nitrate level has over the months gone back down, heading back down to where it came from. So this shows the ability of a single site to be able to assist with managing both groundwater level and quality. James.
Just out of curiosity, are you able to say where the pilot site is?
Yes, so the pilot site is the corner of Fraser's and, where have we got there we go. Let me jump back up to here. Site number 1, and here corner of Fraser's and Timaru Track Road.
Yeah, Fraser's Road.
Great, thank you.
No problems. John.
Yeah, good day. Sorry, no video. I'm working from home. Just for clarity, if you repeat that graph, you should perhaps just in the key have what the yellow line is, because just reading the graph first up, it's not blatantly obvious, I don't think.
Oh, very good, John. It's in there, but the legend has that part of the legend has disappeared. So
Okay, cool.
you're absolutely right. Very, very good. Well spotted. It's there, but not showing. If that makes sense, I will fix that.
Cheers.
Thanks, John. Dave Moore.
Yeah, thanks. You might have covered this, but just how far away is the sample taken from where the water's put into the ground for that nitrate testing?
Yep. So this is the bore. This is the bore name here. 29 metres deep, 1 kilometre, directly down gradient from the site. So it's back down Fraser's Road towards Tynwald.
Well, yeah, so a kilometre away, you're seeing fairly quite a reasonable response to what you're doing, aren't you?
This is a very clear response, and so this is when we start talking about paleo channels and open framework gravels and things like this. So this suggests that there is a very strong hydraulic connection between where we're putting the water and where we're measuring it from. And those of you that have tried to sink a well in these plains, even though it's mostly full of alluvial material, it can still be reasonably hit and miss in terms of where you find water, and that's because post or between glacial periods and the like, all the water moving across the plains has reworked all the material, all the fines, and so you get what's understood to be a good 90% of the total flow through the catchment going through only a small percentage of the actual geology. Kind of like driving across the Rakaia Bridge and seeing where the braids are, seeing where the water is and seeing where the water isn't. That's what we've got down under the ground as well. Adi?
I've noticed there is a strong correlation in July 2018 and July 2020 between you stopping the irrigation, the water and the drop of the water level. But on July 2019, it doesn't seem to be as significant. I was wondering if you know why.
Yes, rainfall. So when we are not operating, if the land surface recharge from rainfall is significant enough, then it will still retain water level that it wouldn't previously have. So you can see here, if my cursor is showing up, the groundwater level drops, but not as significantly as the other one. But then the nitrate concentrations do raise up quite quickly. And the reason for that is, of course, when it rains, the rainfall takes nutrients through the soil, and so the concentrations will increase, whereas the mar water going through straight into the clean gravels means that the concentrations don't increase, they go down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Great. All right, I'll move on. So another new thing in the last year is the first ever detailed computer model of the whole catchment. Even during PC2, we didn't have a computer model like this that was detailed. In fact, we used a computer model that I had created for a different purpose, for assessing collaboration on infrastructure. That's water take and water users working together, combining infrastructure, all of those sorts of things. It wasn't actually meant to simulate the Eco-Hines Plains groundwater system, but it did, and it did an okay job. But this model was designed to do a significantly better job. On the right, this is just an example of the water quality response over a 15-year period from 2020 through to 2035 for our current sites. And we've got about 200 litres a second going through each of our sites in the model, which is more than all of these current sites actually do, but that was the total amount of water available. And so you will see up to 18, 19 milligrams a litre concentration reduction right where we're putting the water, and then the plume of mar water, and it's decreasing contribution, if you like. So around about 10 milligrams a litre reduction down gradient from the site, which is like the monitoring bore I just showed you before. And then as we get further down towards the coast, that obviously mixes with other water coming through the groundwater system and therefore becomes less. We have, when I get to talking about the next set of consents, we have a whole bunch of new sites to try and fill in the gaps, if you like, and we're trying to create more of a curtain of clean water in this emerging groundwater zone, so that the gaps that you can currently see in computer model are covered, and that modelling's underway actually this week. Any questions on the model? No. Okay. The good thing about models is that we can ask it all sorts of questions, do all sorts of things that you can't do in reality, and learn about the possible ramifications before you proceed. Sidney, your hand is up. Shall I go back a slide? Sidney, are you on mute still?
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm a bit sick, so that's why I'm not on camera. It's not a good sight. Can you just clarify for me? I thought that the concentration milligrams per liter on the right-hand side was the actual concentration, but you said there was the difference in concentration that is reducing. Is that right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
It's we asked them to actually change. These colours are rather unhelpful, to be honest. We asked them to change it, but they'd already finished the contract, and so I was going to need to pay them some money to turn it around. So along the top, you'll see this is a difference in concentration. So, for example, if we start at 20 milligrams a litre somewhere, then where it's red, that will be a 19 milligram a litre reduction in concentration. So therefore, the nitrate nitrogen will go down to 1 milligram a litre, for example.
Right.
But red normally means bad. Red normally means high concentration or bad, which is why I asked them to change it, because it confused me initially as well. It's a little backwards in terms of the colours that we normally use. So I can tell you they have been asked for the current computer modelling to turn it around the other way, so that we don't get confused like that.
Cool, thanks.
Chris, Alan.
Yeah, thanks, Brent. Hey, just you probably might have mentioned, I might have missed it, but the ground truthing of the model, that sort of it's a pretty robust model because you can ground truth it. Is that right? Or
great question. So one of the reasons why we didn't have a detailed computer model before is that we haven't had sufficient ground truthing, and there's two parts of that. There's the geology or the hydrogeology. So how does water move through the catchment? And then the second thing is the nutrient concentrations that are already in the groundwater system, and the land surface recharge concentrations coming through. So we haven't had that information to date. So I'm certainly not pointing the finger at anyone and saying we should have had this model before. We haven't had the information, all the information to be able to do this. So it's really thanks to the ongoing technical work for many people in terms of hydrogeology. Patrick Durney's master's thesis had a really good look at this area, and did a computer model of part of it, which is what we've built on essentially. And then it's been this huge expansion in the monitoring program around the catchment, with over 150 groundwater bores now being monitored, which is giving us a much better understanding of water moving through. And then, of course, we've got the reporting of nutrient losses and budgets and all of those sorts of things through both through irrigation companies and consenting processes, reconsenting of discharge limits and all of those sorts of things. So we have been able to utilise that information to be able to create a model that we have much more confidence in. Having said that, there are still weird things that models throw up. that's good because it suggests that something else is going on, and that's where the Philippa Aitchison Earle's work came in, leading us to this concept of snowballing nutrients through groundwater irrigators, not accounting for the nutrients coming in through the groundwater irrigation. For example, the computer model showed us a real anomaly there that didn't make sense until we had a look. And just jumping back to that, what we found was that the contributing catchment, when Philippa did her work, if I jump to the left one, she focused on the area just up gradient from Tynwald. What we've found actually, because the Valletta scheme finishes further away from the Ashburton River, we found the contributing catchment of groundwater irrigators goes all the way up to somewhere along here in the south branch of the Ashburton. So we've had a good process. We need some more years of high monitoring many groundwater bores to be able to update the model even further. You'll notice that I'm not using absolute concentrations here. We're using concentration difference. So for a model to be able to put out absolute actual concentrations, that's a real big ask. That would mean we would need a heap more information, which we don't have at the moment. Hopefully that answers. Yep.
Yeah, so within another 2 or 3 years, you're saying with all the 150.
You just lost your Chris, but
it's going to be a much better system. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yep. So when you get a model like this, it's kind of like the weather forecasting models that they use at the Met Office. You know, every new weather event feeds into that model and makes it hopefully better as long as the people are doing their job. So it's exactly the same here. We have access to that monitoring information, and it can go into the model over the years with all the appropriate cautions on it. I can see another hand without a face.
It's Ange here.
Hi, Ange.
Hi.
Thanks.
So the hydrogeology, that's been mentioned quite a bit lately, and I'm sort of a novice on that. But from what I can understand, are you breaking new pathways on that sort of work that we are doing here? So across New Zealand, is there other examples of where this type of work is happening, or are we cutting edge?
Oh, look, we're cutting edge absolutely for this catchment, and have been since the early days of the zone committee. Really, this is it's an alluvial plain system. You know, we had started with 2 big glaciers, the Rangitata Glacier, which was big and pushed nearly to Tynwald, and then the smaller Ashburton Glacier, which came in and occupied a smaller area than all the old swamps pushing up from below, and then eventually the Hikio coming over the top. That's taken a while to understand exactly how that system works. For example, water travelling underneath this river. So some of the water showing up in some of the drains we were talking about before, Taylor's maybe home paddock drain, actually having a contributing catchment on the other side of the Hikio Hines River due to the groundwater pathways. That's been an accumulating knowledge over the last 10 years for sure. Then the other thing is when you invest time and effort and money and expertise into studying a system like this, you generate a lot of new knowledge, and we're absolutely doing that at the moment. Which is good for the next planning process we have to go through in a few years' time and the like. We will have a much more scientifically robust set of information with which to make recommendations on.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I think that's fantastic. So thanks, Brett.
Brent, can I just ask a follow-up question to Ange's one?
Yep.
Yeah, slightly off topic, but is this model, this new computer model, would it be in the future possible that it could monitor the amount of groundwater in the catchment? So when people are on adaptive management, and you could say, well, there's actually 2 million litres of water available, is that the sort of thing this thing could possibly do?
Yes. Yes is the short answer.
Wow, that's pretty important. It could be good.
It is. yeah, this is going to be a really important tool moving forward. And as I said, this won't be the last version. It obviously takes investment, like any model, to keep bringing it up to date and to be able to include new information, potentially real-time information type things in the long run. But we've got a really good framework and structure in place for it. So yes, it's going to be able to be really useful for this catchment.
Who owns the model?
The model's currently a joint project between the Heke Hines Water Enhancement Trust and Environment Canterbury, but with both organisations funded through rates, the answer is we all do.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I'll move on. So we've moved on from the plains and the focus just on groundwater, and so this project focusing on the near river recharge concept is focusing on improving the health of the Heke Hines River. So from essentially the RDR, where the RDR cuts across, or the Gawler Downs area, right down to the coast is the aim. So the NRR1 site, many of you may have been to, the South Hines site. What we're calling MAR 17, our Lenny's Road site, is technically a MAR site, but it is right in getting water into the floodplain of the river and showing up in the river. So we've included it here. We have 2 more sites on the table, and site NRR3, the Winslow Road site, I wish to come back to soon. What I really like about projects like this is that we get to see the results much faster than we do in a groundwater system. A groundwater system's hidden away from sight until you monitor a bore, and the water moves very slowly. We can pressurise the system, but it still moves slowly. A river system moves much quicker, and so we can see results much quicker, adapt and change, and do even better for the river. And so you can see our achievements already, measurable improvements in both water quality, quantity, fish populations, and the like, and some co-benefits, if you like, with the new biodiversity plantings. And in a near river recharge site where we are raising the shallow groundwater table, in other places, so up my Waikirikiri Selwyn project, we're seeing the native plantings flourish much more quickly because we can manage the shallow groundwater level, and their root systems can sense that and get their roots down into that water, and therefore grow more quickly and more robustly than they would in a dryland situation. And so these sort of co-benefits are something which we're encouraging. So this site looks a little bit different than it did pre the flooding. You can still see the extent of the flooding. So this lovely clean gravel used to never be clean down here. And so this is all thanks to the flood. You can see where the flood came through here, this area through here, and then cleared area which is regrowing back, and then of course the flood went right through our basins as well. So we have a large new bund in here to try and hold the river back, and as noted, between this historic wetland, so each of these white dots is a tree. So we've densely planted this historic wetland. Between that site and this area here, we have 9,500 native plants in there, and already growing very well. As I said, it's been a wetter year, but also with the shallow water table raised. We've constructed these new basins since the flooding, and that, as you can see, has doubled our potential capacity once we get a new consent to operate at that higher capacity. The river hasn't needed recharge, as I'm sure you're aware, in the last year, and so we haven't actually operated the system at capacity almost at all. We've just had water trickling in when it's needed it. Nature's given us the water we need. We've got, this is our Kawaro Canterbury Mudfish Wetland. We have our second set of macrophytes going in there this Friday. So we've got a site management plan with a whole bunch of boxes that we need to tick for the dock transfer of mudfish to be allowed, hopefully winter next year. I'm going to presume you've had a read of this. So as I noted before, we've got really promising, measurable statistics to back what we're doing up at this site, showing that it is making a real measurable difference. Top left-hand corner, this is what we call our Mars 17 or Lenny's Road site. So you can see the water's heading down towards the river, which is the poplar willow trees in the background there. The river up gradient from this point during this river trip was dry, and this is just below the river point and further on down. So the water nearly reached State Highway 1, starting just below the site. We also had base flow coming in, obviously, in the shallow groundwater system from the upper site, which will have helped as well. But seeing surface water re-emerging in the river and finding its way down the river when it would have naturally been dry is very heartening. These are from our Year 5 results. So again, measurable improvements, both in terms of the invertebrates over the last 3 years. But also we've had a close look at why, so I'm down the bottom right-hand corner now. This is the nitrate, actually it's the NNN target, nitrite, nitrogen target. Currently at 3.8, and you can see here in that same summer, we were very close to that target for a period of 5 months. And we started the Lenny's Road site just before this period here. And so we've had a good check of all the water quality data on both sides. So that's the drains on both sides coming into the catchment. And we've concluded that our clean water contribution is making a measurable difference here, and is part of the reason why these numbers are so low. So we look forward to a few more years of that so that we can, I guess, solidify our confidence in this area. So this is our new site to be that we need your assistance on with some putea. In the upper site, I guess the constructed wetland and the Canterbury mudfish, that's a form of mahinga support. This site, we're actually taking the water. This is lateral discharge race number 3 of the MHV water scheme, where it comes back into the riverbed normally. The plan is an offtake, sediment forebay here, and then a mahinga area for freshwater crays and mussels initially, with the necessary support around them. And then that water tips over into the recharge basin. And we've got some support here. The flooding was all around, but gave us some really useful information about what we needed to do to adapt our design for future flooding. Those of you that know the area know that the water tends to come down the road here often. The river breaks out up gradient and also overland flow. And so we've got a return channel here, a flood return channel, in addition to down the road. So that should help this site in future times. We're looking at lizard habitat in here as well. And of course, the opportunity to replace what is currently willows and poplars and blackberry and the like for some appropriate eco-source natives. So we're hoping to be able to connect at least with the Hines School and others nearby. There's also the nearby Mahinga drain managed area down Swamp Road. that we're looking to support. Angela.
Thanks, Brett. I'll reinforce it. Hines School are very, very keen to be involved, really when you are. Can you just confirm, so we've had some mana whenua input into the design of this site, of the map that we're looking at, is that right?
Absolutely. Yep. So both mana whenua in a lead position on the project, and we have a cultural assessment program underway. They've undertaken their initial cultural assessment through there, and then those people are contracted to come back post construction, and then again a few years later. So we have an ongoing contracted cultural oversight for this project. Yes.
Thank you. So I had the opportunity to do that site visit recently, and very grateful for that. So being boots on the ground and hearing a bit more about it and some of the other questions that were asked, I think it's a pretty exciting opportunity and a really exciting community engagement opportunity.
Thanks, Ange. Ian McKenzie, was it your hand? Are you on mute, Ian?
Sorry, Brett. Yeah, look, I haven't been able to get to the site yet, but how? What's the size of the site compared to, let's say, the Tynwald, the first, our first site at Tynwald, above Tynwald there?
This is around about a hectare all up.
So about the same sort of size in total.
Around about the same sort of size. The actual basin itself will be smaller than the pilot site. But as you can imagine, going right into the riverbed gravels, the infiltration rate will be greater. Of course, you never know what it is till you try. So we may achieve similar infiltration rates with a smaller area.
Cool. Thanks, Brett. Bill.
Brett, when's the optimum time to be planting? When are you hoping to do that? Is it?
Yeah, so I've noted 2022, 2023 as our target. And it's a great question. I mean, the optimum time down here is, well, actually, this being close enough to the coast, I suspect you could do an autumn as well as a spring planting here. So hopefully that would give us 2 goes. Noting the consent application and noting my next slide about consenting. So obviously we require some construction consents for a site like this, which is part of a larger consent package. So the duration of the consenting process will obviously determine when we can move into construction and therefore into planting. So with a fair wind spring of this year, with a slightly more of a headwind, then autumn next year.
Are you going to talk about dollars in this presentation, or are you just?
So I'm happy to talk about dollars. I mean, with a site of this size, the potential spend goes up in the tens of thousands quite quickly. We do have support from Synlait with regard to plants for this site, but obviously there are a lot of exotic invasive plant species around here, and so the maintenance regime over the next 3 to 4 years is going to be critical. So the answer to the question about how much are we asking for is obviously is as much as you can provide, but even whatever that is will be gratefully received, and will mean we have to find less money elsewhere.
So would you prefer a one-off one or a couple of payments over a couple of years?
Yeah, is both an option?
Well, the committee's going to discuss it, obviously, and it'd be just nice to know what you, I think, what your preference would be. It'd be good to know your preference, possibly. I mean, if you say, well, either or whatever, if you're appealing to us, yeah. So, yeah, well, I suppose I'm asking the question. You've got to answer it.
Yeah. So Obviously, the largest cost is in the first year. Even if we are supplied with most of the plants we need, we've obviously got all the guarding and the planting and the initial maintenance of it. Yeah. And so there are many tens of thousands of dollars potentially involved in that. And so an initial payment, initial grant, shall we say, in year 22, 23, would be most appreciated. But if you were also able to keep in mind smaller grants in following financial years so that we can have some support for the maintenance, that would also be greatly appreciated.
If you're using consents, you've got to go through a consenting process, etc. I mean, you would probably be really sort of in our funding for next season, wouldn't you? Really? So the financial year is the end of June 22, and then the next year starts 1 July 22 to 30th of June 23. You're probably going to fit in there somewhere.
That's exactly right. So that's what I mean. Wasn't clear with 2022-23, but that's what I mean with regard to the financial year, the July to June financial year. That will be our largest expenditure in the biodiversity aspects of this, and then the following financial years there will, likely be $10,000 to $20,000 of maintenance a year that we will need to find the money for.
Okay, thanks, Brent.
All right. So this was the question. This was the question earlier relating to consents. You'll see that we have two what are called long-term consents at the moment. So December 2029 is the longest they can be granted for with regard to the potential next regional plan. That's my understanding. And we have two consents which run out next year. And so we have a consenting process underway, which is the preparation of the applications, talking with potentially affected parties and other interested stakeholders, which has been underway for some time and will continue till we're sufficiently advanced with those discussions to have confidence that we can go into a consenting process without any nasty surprises, which normally result in an increase in costs. And that's us.
That's a very thorough presentation, Brent. Excellent. So the committee, are there any general business questions you want to ask Brent about, just in general about this project, or anything else you want to just go over while we've got him on the line? I'll ask one, Brent. During the year that's coming up, we're obviously going to try and do a workshop or a field trip during the year, and there's a few options. Would your or Pete Lowe, who wants to answer it, are you in the position to sort of host something, one of these sites, or is that you're not really, with the flood and everything, not really on your agenda, or would you be happy to do that?
Can I answer that, Bill? No, would very much appreciate to have the zone committee there to have a look around and make that happen to whatever suits the zone committee.
Oh, great. Thanks, Pete. So any other questions, anyone? Okay, well, Brent, you've done a great job, and well done to Pete and Rab and everything for...
Chris here, Bill.
Oh, sorry, Chris.
Yep. Brent, one of the early slides you had there had a whole lot of solar panels. What do they do?
Mm-hmm. Oh. So you missed the most important part of the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. That's on Ends boundary, Chris. It's one of the all still in one piece.
So that is the solar powering of one of Ashburton Irrigation's groundwater supply bores. And so we piloted this up at another project site I've got off the Selwyn River, and the government funding came in for this project for the creation of a business case to show, or otherwise, the economic viability of solar power to assist lowland waterways, and so that's the tidal stream augmentation trial that we've been talking about.
Chris, if I may.
It's the Windermere Drain, and Chris, you'll remember that a while ago, the Eccleston scheme came to the Zone Committee saying there was an issue with funding because we're required to supplement the flows in the Windermere Drain while we're irrigating. But once you get into the winter, and when we had a series of dry winters following dry summers, if we were to turn off our pumps, if the Eccleston scheme had been
correct, I got that. Yep.
Pumps, then the drains would have gone dry, and all the benefit of the fish life and everything else that was kept in the drains by using them as a conduit for the irrigation water over the summer would be lost if they then subsequently went dry in the winter. So the scheme was keeping the pumps going, but that was coming at substantial cost to those farmers, the members of the irrigation scheme. And so, in conjunction with the Zone Committee and the Zone Implementation Team, it was considered that perhaps there was a better way of doing things, and hence the solar power to try to supplement the cost of doing the pumping.
Oh, no, that's brilliant. Thanks, Ian.
Okay. Well, if that's all, thanks very much, Brent and Pete and Rab, and we'll have a discussion during our meeting about funding, and our people will talk to your people.
Thank you all. Really appreciate your time.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Dave, what's next?
Okay, so next on our agenda, we are going to introduce some of the Environment Canterbury Zone Delivery Team in Ashburton. There's been the odd change there, and Chris suggested recently that it would be quite good to introduce some of the staff members, and we might look to actually expanding that out to perhaps Ashburton District Council and other organisations that we deal with in future meetings. So today we've got Annabelle Bassett, Donna Field, Chris Eccleston, and Billy Bartram is also going to join us. So I might start at the top of the list. Annabelle, I see you online then. Would you like to just introduce yourself first?
Yep, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. So my name's Annabelle Bassett. I started at Environment Canterbury in November as a Resource Management Officer and an Incident Response Officer. So I'm originally from Rakaia, from Dorrie. I grew up on a dairy farm and a crop farm. Parents are still out there. And then I went to university, studied water resource management, and here we are. I don't know if my dad's that impressed that I work at Environment Canterbury, but that is what it is. But yeah, so far loving it. So yeah, that's me.
Great.
Cool. Thanks, Annabelle. Does anyone have any questions for Annabelle? You're all good.
So Annabelle, what do you actually do on a day-to-day? If I rocked up into the office, what would be my engagement with you?
So a lot of the time I will be monitoring consents. That's my main work. So in terms of consents, I've been doing a lot of stock water, irrigation schemes, and wastewater. Otherwise, I'll be out in the field doing incident response and talking to people and seeing what's going on.
Okay, thanks, Annabelle. Welcome.
Cool. Okay, so we might move on now. Thank you, Annabelle. Move on to Donna Field. I see Donna's online there.
Oh, hello, everyone. It's nice to see some familiar faces and some new faces. I've worked at Environment Canterbury for 6 years now, and my job's as a biodiversity and land management advisor. So in my role, I generally work between the Ashburton River and the Rakaia River, up around Mount Somers and Staveley, and I get the pleasure of going and giving advice and funding, even better when you can offer people money for biodiversity projects, or if people are wondering about their nutrient losses or farm and environment plans. So I get to meet a lot of people, and myself and my husband Ben, we've been farming up on the back of Mount Hutt, up in the Rakaia Gorge for the last 28 years. So we've got a sheep and beef property up there. And I actually spent 3 years chairing the Zone Committee. So I'm familiar with the role you guys are doing there. And yeah, it's not always an easy task, is what I think about it. So well done for taking it on.
Thanks, Donna. Great. Has anyone got any questions or comments for Donna? I think you're pretty well known to.
Hi, Donna, Chris here. So as a farmer, and you're in our patch, what are these buckets of money you're talking about? Where do we go? And is this a zone committee money that you're dishing out, or are there other buckets within ECAN that you get to dish out and help us with our biodiversity?
So previously it's been zone committee money, and now most of the money that we have available, unfortunately, is no longer buckets, is focused on wet areas, so wetlands, riparian zones, more so, and a lot of that comes, we just distribute regional P money.
Cool, thanks, Donna.
I think I got most of that, yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on now to Billy Bartram. Billy.
Kia ora everyone, I'm Billy Bartram. Background, I'm from Cora, off a sheep, beef and forestry farm called Linton Downs up the Inland Road there. I went to Lincoln and graduated in 2020, did a Bachelor of Environmental Management, and I've been at ECAN for a year now. And something I like about my job is just getting out and talking to farmers and different landowners in awesome part of the country and getting to promote good environmental outcomes.
Thanks, Billy. Chris, have you got a question for Billy?
I'll pass on that, Billy, but yeah, good to hear you there. Thank you.
Cool. Billy, you actually work across 2 zones, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, I forgot to say that. Yeah, I work half time in the Ashburton zone and then the other half of my time's in the Selwyn zone.
And where do you live, Billy?
I live up the Rakai Gorge.
Okay, so yeah, good location for both. Okay, we'll move on now to Chris Eccleston. You guys, a lot of you have met Chris, but Chris will give us a bit of an intro as well and what he does.
Cool, thank you, Dave. Kia ora koutou. I am Chris Eccleston, so I'm the Zone Manager Southern. Background before I came to ECAN, I've been with ECAN since 2017, I think, so 5 years and a bit now. Longer term background, basically a quality manager in health and biotech and medical devices. Came to New Zealand in 2012 to work for Fonterra as their nutritionals quality assurance manager, up in the Waikato and Northland, and then went back into health over here, worked for Waikato District Health Board and a primary care provider in the North Island. Then moved south to South Canterbury District Health Board. My wife is from Pleasant Point, so I have family in the in-law side all around South Canterbury, which is great. And then took the opportunity with ECAN, as I said, in 2017. So my role with ECAN, when I started, I was basically working with the upper and the lower Waitaki zone committees, and then have slowly moved north over the ensuing number of years. Took over the OTOP committee area as well about 4 years ago. And a couple of years ago, my area extended now to cover Ashburton as well. My main duties are overall team leadership for the Southern Zone team, which basically, from the introductions you've had from the other guys in the team, I do the link between strategic organisational direction to on-the-ground function. So that is trying to find the likes of Donna, money, and making sure we have the right projects aligned with our overall long-term plan and annual plans. So we're delivering what ECAN needs to deliver in a wider space, in a local direction. It's also getting my head around, like many others within the organisation, the changes coming through government, what that's going to look like, how that's going to impact what we do, and the opportunities that will come out of that. Dave said, what challenges do you face or something you love about my role? What I love about my role is enabling people like Donna and Annabelle and Billy, who are really, really good, to get out and just do their jobs, to try and take away as much noise as I can from within our organisation and from around the community. I suppose I'm a bit odd that being a quality manager, particularly in health, I spent a lot of time working through complaints and events, as they used to be called, so things that go wrong and trying to fix those. And, you know, following up from things like the flooding recently and other activities that ECAN are involved in, I still get a lot of pleasure from being able to link with and support people in the community to get through really challenging situations. So that's me, briefly.
Can I ask Chris a question? Chris Bell here.
Hello, Bill. Thank you.
Just on funding biodiversity projects and these sort of things. In previous years, you know, we had extra funding, which you're well aware of, and then it's been chopped back and it's going to change again. But as you've even seen in this presentation today with the Marboys and Mayford Hines and catchment groups and all those sort of things, the local community are coming to the zone committee and saying, well, what's your funding? Do you understand it? And applying for it. And we're saying, well, yes, we live in the zone. We do understand it. I just feel that we're getting a bit sidetracked because, you know, the committee's sitting there having these good applications, but we've only got a small amount of money to give out, while probably you've got other field officers that are doing other projects on the side using some money that we used to have access to. So is that actually the case, or is biodiversity a 50 grand total for this area for a year?
No, it isn't a 50 grand total for this area. There is a whole biodiversity fund which is managed through the biodiversity sort of regional section within ECAN, which we can access. We also have other funding streams, things known as zone priority projects, that we have some funding in there. So that's about 250,000 across the south. So that's Rakaya to Waitaki, projects within there that we can fund and support. So there are other streams available. So I think this is where there's, as we develop with what your funding looks like, this is where I will continue to come along to these meetings to see what the opportunities are to align with what you want to do with what works in our work program as well to meet the LTP, and then make sure that we can sort of support numerous projects in the least officious way, I suppose, so that we can make the best use of the money that we have.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I see there's a few questions. So Donna Field.
Well, just to add to what Chris said, we also work in conjunction with a number of other agencies. So quite a lot of our projects, our larger projects, cross-agency projects, especially in the braided rivers, where we're working with DOC and with LINS, which is a really efficient way for us to use our money, and a great way to collect resources as well and knowledge.
Do you, Donna, being a past zone committee chairperson yourself, do you feel is it still as engaged, or do you think there's a bit of a disconnect with the zone committee with what's actually happening on the ground in the broader sense?
I'm not sure, Bill, what you're looking at. I was having a look at what you're funding your projects for, and looking at their biodiversity. You know, how much of it's biodiversity, how much of it's land management, and that interaction. And I mean, you say about you think your money's gone. I must admit, when we lost the input into that money, I thought that money had gone for us as well. So I think we're all looking around for money a bit, and I think that it's quite key for the zone committee to keep in touch with biodiversity as well as land management. I think it's easy to go one way or the other, and trying to keep that balanced approach can be quite difficult.
Thanks, Donna. Ian McKenzie.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I guess you're touching on what I think is one of the most important issues that where the zone committee and ECAN has to struggle with, and that is trying to coordinate the projects to make sure that, and I'm not being critical of what you said, Chris, but you said numerous projects spread across the region. The issue is if we spread ourselves too thin and there isn't coordination between all the different projects and the different agencies that are working together, you'll end up having some degrees of replication. You may also end up with projects that have started off with hugely good intent, but fall over because of a lack of support and ongoing funding. And so I looked to last month's zone committee bill where the zone committee agreed to fund and cushion or the catchment collectives request for a coordinator. And I think that sort of role where we're putting money as the zone committee into coordinating the effort that's going on across the district. And we've heard about the Heinz Hekia Water Enhancement Trust today. We heard last month from Mayfield MHV about their project on O'Shaughnessy's, and we also heard about the COVID funding models projects on the Ashburton and Heinz River for berm planting and berm restoration. So there's a huge amount going on, and it would seem to me that if the zone committee concentrates all requests, all the projects on the overarching aim of improving water quality in those water bodies that we've identified as our priorities, and that coordinates all this effort, we're more likely to achieve the outcomes that we're looking for than if we spread ourselves too thinly and get dissociated from each other. And that's an important role for Chris to think about and work with the different people that are working together, because I know when I sit around the council table and you hear about all the things that are going on and all the possible funding streams, there isn't as much coordination for the man on the ground as perhaps there should be or there could be, and that's and I think the zone committee's got a really important role to play in trying to get that coordination right.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. We'll get some comments from you, Chris, at the end. There's a few questions, so you take notes. Angela?
Yeah, so mine's probably just carrying on from what Ian McKenzie has just said. So there's been quite a bit of a change of guard, obviously, in our zone team here. So Donna Lill leaving, Janine left, Sarah Heddle leaving, left. One of the things Janine used to do was come along on a relatively regular basis and present the work program and give us an update of where they're at. So that focal point in terms of that coordination, us getting an understanding of what it is that the local zone team is doing was hugely beneficial. And I wonder whether that's something that we could perhaps reintroduce. And I scrounged around trying to find a work program recently I was looking for where there was potentially a duplication on one of the projects that had been touted. And rebuilding those relationships with those sort of 3 or 4 key people that have gone is quite challenging. Hopefully those people are going to be replaced, but I'm probably going to ask the question: are they, and where that's actually at, Chris?
Cool. Shall I wait till Chris's points as well, Bill?
Oh, yeah. Well, Chris, are you on the similar vein, Chris Allen?
Yeah, it pretty much was. I was going to say, just as a member of the zone committee, is that any angle in this that would actually help give us some clarity around how we should be looking at some of these projects, and so that I used the words when I was questioning Donna is about buckets of money, and as a member of the community, how do we get this a bit of coordination, because I just see that there's a little bit piecemeal, and I'd like to think there is a better plan like what Ian's saying as well. So let's just bundle it all in together.
Yeah. So it's communication, Chris, and the same sort of strategy, I think, is what we're looking at.
Oh, absolutely. And to comment on Councillor McKenzie's first comment, I completely agree. In my time at ECAN, and some of it came out of the way we got funding through zone committees, we've got some really, really great projects in lots of different little places, because we got small amounts of money to do smaller projects. So I think a lot of the thinking on what we're doing now is trying to have that regional alignment of work programs that the zone delivery team work towards, as I said, through the LTP. So there is that wider Canterbury alignment on activity. But yeah, I completely and utterly agree that doing lots of little bits doesn't work. We need to look at how we align those. I did say we've got a number of projects across the wider south, and we do, and we are in a process of, if you like, trying to concentrate them down so that they're in 2 or 3 specific subject areas, if you like. So we're focusing on the same sort of activity in different geographical locations, and I envisage that will get narrower so that we are working towards, if you like, larger outcomes by being able to align lots of different activity from across wider ECAN, not just zone delivery and zone committee linkages, but into the wider ECAN space of the rivers teams and biosecurity and people like that. And also following on from what Donna said around, we look to collaborate with other organisations, and that's all part of the process. What are they doing and what are we doing, and how can we sort of support each other in the same geographical locations or in the same subject areas? So that's a lot of the ongoing discussion. To Angela's point, yes, there have been a number of changes within the team, some internal, some external. Recruitment is ongoing in those places. I'm hoping to be able to announce the new zone lead in Ashburton in the next couple of weeks. We're just working through some finalising of that process. And we have recruited new members of the team in to cover some of those roles. We're really lucky with the likes of Sarah that she's still within the organisation, so we can use her experience. I was gutted when Janine decided to step away for a while. I'm also still in contact with Janine, looking at how we can, when she's ready, look at some contract linkages with her again, because I think she has massive value, particularly in the Ashburton space. Work programs, yes, I'd be happy to come and talk about the work programs, or get the likes of the Donnas and the Annabelles to talk about specifics of the work program. And you know, I'm happy to link in with Dave about when that works for you guys. We are slightly different now that it's driven from a different place, as I said, from the LTP, but it would be really good to then be able to go, these are the areas we're focusing on. How does that link in with what you as a zone committee are looking at funding, and how can we then, you know, get the best bang for whatever buck we have in that space? Chris, what angles and buckets of money? We link in with our other parts of the organisation that do that key linkage into, if you like, central government, and where they identify possible pots of money. So we can put applications in for those. And we've done quite a number of those over the last year, I would say, in collaboration with Runanger and various other parties. We have not been successful, unfortunately, but that's again part of my role, is to try and work through how we can identify central funding or aligned funding with other organizations, and supporting other people to do work that we could be doing. You know, it's just trying to find ways of using whatever the money is. And I think that's going to be one of my daily challenges, is finding where the money is and seeing how we can get hold of it.
So Chris, have you got a follow-up question, have you?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Hey, Chris, it's a question to you, and it probably something that happened in our last monthly meeting, where we had this opportunity to give out or support organisations in some really good projects. In the past, when we've had biodiversity funding, it comes with a recommendation from a staff member that this satisfies the such and such with the biodiversity, it satisfies this as far as our implementation plan and our goals, whatever. whereas we were actually, as a zone committee, almost coming through the what is this going to do? What is this? The zone committee was doing all that sort of work, and I would just like to think that before we go giving out money, that we're looking at, or supporting organisations, we're looking at how it fits within our zone implementation program or our overall strategy we're trying to deliver on, rather than just, here it is, there's three projects, you got $50,000, which ones do you support? It was just sort of going back to the way that there was someone within the ECAN who was actually making some sort of recommendation that it is a worthy project because we've done the investigation.
I think that's a fair point, and I love him dearly, but I might throw that one at Dave a bit, in that we need to understand how that system's going to work, because it's. I completely agree with what you're saying, Chris. We need to have that same sort of veracity over the projects that are coming in. So how do we make that function in the new model that we have now? So that's probably something for me and Dave to follow through and go, here's the question, how do we make that work?
I could just comment on if it's a biodiversity, strongly biodiversity project, then our little flowchart for how we make decisions about funding has a little part in there that says we need to get advice. Is this on that project? So there is a little stop in there, that a little check that says there's a biodiversity project. Then let's go and get some advice from within ECAN about the value of this project before we go to the next step. Maybe that might need to be widened a bit more in what sort of advice we need. But that's a start.
Okay. Ian McKenzie.
So this is exactly the point I just wanted to make comment on, Chris Allen, and that is that the zone committee should have its own priorities firmly in your own mind, and so when projects come up which might seem to be a diversion from your priorities, you have the right and perhaps you should be saying no to those projects and saying yes to those projects that align with the priorities that you've already established. And you don't necessarily need Dave and his team from the staff to tell you where your priorities are. It may be they give you some technical advice as to whether this project's likely to achieve some of those aims, but you should be in a position to understand your own priorities in terms of the zone committee's own priorities as to where you should put the emphasis. I think this whole discussion around buckets of money gives me the impression you think there's a lot of money out there. My impression is that most of these buckets are the size of thimbles, I think.
You might be right, I think, Councillor McKenzie.
Donna, if you have a question.
I'm agreeing with Ian. I don't see buckets of money out and about. But one of the things that I'm thinking about listening to this discussion and biodiversity projects and priorities and where we're looking at, I'm just wondering where the zone implementation plan that was originally written comes into this, because there's a number of goals in there that are expected to be completed by, say, 2023. There's priority areas and priority projects, and I'm just wondering whether that's still a functioning document or whether it's sort of gone by the by. And if it is, what happens to those goals that were put in there to be completed by certain times?
Well, Dave might be able to answer that, Donna, but it definitely is like a wave round. We've even got it enlarged. But it definitely is the we have got that guide and the projects that we're meant to concentrate on. Of course, the Canterbury Freshwater Management Strategy is in the process of being changed a bit with the government influence, which has made a difference. And obviously, the discussion we're just having on about the zone implementation team of ECAN, that sort of changed too. But the priorities, which is the Ashburton Lakes and the tributaries and the planting and the Hinds Hikaro catchment is still very much in front of us. That's what makes up our agenda, probably. Did you want to add anything, Dave?
Yeah, I think what Bill's talking about there is our high level priorities, and it's how we boil those down to what are the important actions we take. You're right, Donna. I think we can't lose sight of the zip and the zippers. We've also got the targets document, the Cwms targets, for 2025. There's things in there. We've tried to look at those when we've looked at our action plan for the zone committee as well. We've also got things like the Homes Drains Working Party, recommendations and, assessing where we're at with that, and there's work going on with that. So it's trying to get a view of all that and keep it in our heads and figure out where we're going. It's not easy, but I agree we can't lose sight of any of those documents.
Thanks for that. We might move on to the next item. Chris, thanks for your participation with your team. And I think the first thing to take away would be, at our monthly meetings, there should be someone, either yourself or someone from your department, that would be attending a zone committee meeting, so we don't look like we've got a disconnect. Even though Dave's a great job, but he's a facilitator. We need that person on the ground who's under your team to be there too. If I think that's what we're asking for.
Absolutely, and I'm fully for that. It'll be me or it'll be somebody from the team if I'm unavailable. So yes, we are committed to that.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for your time, and Billy's and the new people. So enjoyed that. What's the next item, Chris?
Dave.
Dave.
So we're now up to the committee update, but I thought this might be a good point just to jump in with that.
I'm on mute actually, Bill. It's Dave you're after.
Okay, you two. I thought this might be good.
To delay the meeting. Sorry, I won't get into an argument with Chris. Carry on, Dave. I won't be drawn into it.
Chris has already sent me $50 to make the meeting go very long.
I've seen some of his questions. I think there's anyway. Carry on. Okay, Dave, where you go?
Well, we could actually just talk about the email from Jude Urgulay, if you'd like. Just to...
yes.
Okay,
Is everyone seeing that or not? Or you're just going to talk to it, are you?
Yeah, I was just going to talk to it.
Okay.
I don't know if I sent it out or not. I can send it out though. So you remember at the last meeting there was some discussion about whether someone from the Clearwater Huts Association should be seconded onto the zone committee, or how the zone committee could, I guess, be more in touch with what's going on in terms of the work done in Otawharakai, Ashburton Lakes. So we took this back to Judith Urgulay in ECAN, who was the person who presented to us, and she's had a meeting with the working group up there about how we can keep the zone committee better informed. So I'll just read out her email to Bill, which was sent yesterday. Kia ora, Bill. This morning we had our monthly Otawharakai working group meeting, and we discussed the request by zone committee for more awareness of the work occurring to restore the Māori of Otawharakai at this morning's working group meeting. There was strong agreement to providing more information about what is happening in the catchment to the Ashburton Zone Committee and other interested people. Out of the working group meetings, we will create a summary update that will be provided through to the Ashburton Zone Committee. There was general agreement for an update to occur every 2 months or thereabouts. We will work with Dave over the rhythm. The intent would be that the update would be quite generalised, but pull in 1 or 2 highlights or key milestones occurring with the different streams of work. If the Zone Committee wanted to find out more about a work stream or project, then specific requests could be made for more detail on that by the lead agency. Regards, Judith. So just wanted to let you know that was the thinking and get feedback from the committee about whether you think that would work.
Just a quick update for the committee, just carrying on from what Dave said. I think after our last meeting, we had the feeling, and I certainly did, that the zone committee was almost being put to one side, and this working group that we didn't know much about was actually running the lake review process. So we reached out to her, and so this is her response, that they will keep us informed, and any issues will come up, and I think bi-monthly. So has anyone got any comments if they think that's the right way to go, or we're getting involved enough or not enough? Or
So Bill, I brought the suggestion that, and it came from the Clearwater Hut Holders Association AGM, that chappie whose name I can't remember, they thought it would be useful if he was seconded to the Zone Committee for reference to any discussions around the Ashburton Lakes. I accept that perhaps him sitting on the zone committee may not be appropriate, given that we're a receptor of information rather than part of the discussion, and I think his expertise needs to be included in perhaps the working party. Now, Judith hasn't specifically dealt with that issue, and maybe Dave, you could go back to Judith and say, look, she needs to consider including their advice. I mean, probably to a degree, apart from the landowners up there, this chap is probably knows more about the Ashburton Lakes than anybody else, and so it would be quite useful to include that that information, you know, that expertise in some form or other. And his name is Greg Brake, and I can send you his contact details, Dave. I've talked to Stephanie Ricksacker about this, and she was going to do something as well. So perhaps you could talk to Stephanie, and there's a lot of things going on, so not everything gets done immediately. But Greg is a long time person from up there. He knows probably more about every individual stream and water body in the Ashburton Lakes than most others, and it's one of the holes that's missing in that working party, other than the landowners, and they were missing from the working party for a while. It was all agencies. Most of the agencies, they don't live up there, they don't know the areas intimately, so intimately as perhaps those guys who live up there, and Greg would be considered perhaps neutral compared to the landowners. And so we're missing the opportunity here for a bit of finite detail if we don't use that sort of expertise. I guess that's the position I was coming from, and the zone committee might be the inappropriate place for Greg to sit, but I think there are some places where he should be sitting.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, I'll take that back to Jude, and then she'll probably talk with Stephanie. Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's very much about the information going in the other direction from Greg. I sat in on the committee meeting yesterday, and when they discussed this, and I think the thinking is that if they can formulate this kind of a report to the zone committee, that they'll be able to use that information to report to other community groups as well, which would be really useful.
So Dave, if you email her back on our behalf and just say thank you for her her information, and then we would greatly receive a monthly report. We'd like. Thank you.
Yep.
Chris.
Yeah, my personal opinion would be when we will have this on our agenda whenever we're going to be talking about or getting an update of what's going on up the gorge. In which case, there would be nothing wrong with having that person as being part of. We could have that person as part of a discussion. If we've got questions, we might as well talk to someone who's got some local knowledge, and we can pull that as part of to help us to understand some of the issues as well.
Yeah. And
rather than having them as on the zone committee, but they could be a technical person, like we have a cultural advisors from time to time. We have water hydrologists from time to time. Why can't we just have a local up there who's a little bit unbiased?
Yeah, I'll take that on board. So should we just, Dave, should we now go on to this funding, this last bit of funding, and talk about the MAR projects, and also this last late paper that we just received from the Canterbury Water Management Community Engagement Fund application from the MCC Science Update?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. So we're on to agenda item number 10, really, which is my my update for the committee. So there's some things you can really take as read about the regional committee there and the annual plan process. And getting on to the budget, there's a summary there that we've got 50,000, we've committed 42,000, we have 8,000 remaining. In terms of progress with those projects at the moment, I've just sent a draft funding agreement to the Mid-Canterbury Catchment Collective for them to look through, and I've also sent a draft agreement to MHV Water for that first item, and we've got that money reserved for Wakanui Hapua. So things are progressing along there with those, and today we've had Brett's funding request, which is really for the next financial year. So we probably don't need to do too much with that at this stage, but at some stage we'll need to start thinking about that next financial year's budget. And then we've had the late paper that's just been sent out to everyone this morning around the science funding for measuring water quality. So perhaps we could open that up for discussion, Bill.
Yeah, so how about everyone, if we just, I don't know if everyone's had a chance to read it, but maybe just have a minute and just, has everyone got the paper? Does everyone know what we're talking about?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll just have a minute to read it, and then we'll have a discussion about it. Maybe Angela might talk to it.
Just to clarify too, Bill, the bit at the top is there's no change. So that was submitted last time. So it's just really the bit at the bottom that says update following Friday's meeting. So
great.
Just clarify that.
Are you happy to speak to it, Angela?
Sure am. Yep, with conflict declared and all that jazz.
Yes, we accept your conflict. Well, your conflict is that you've sort of been facilitating this a wee bit. That's correct?
Yes. Yep. This has been a project that it's actually from being able to sit around the zone committee and as Ian McKenzie brought up before, there's a lot happening and there was concerns about how much of it was coordinated, where we were duplicating and then where there were gaps. So being on part of the zone highlighted that. So then I went away back into my community and thought, how can we be more coordinated and more cohesive in our approach? So this is a result of that work.
Okay. So what have you got a figure in mind that you need to do this, get this website and hosting?
So absolutely. So following Friday's meeting, and you can sort of see who we had in the room. So that was a big undertaking, getting all those parties in the room. And it sort of started out with not a lot of momentum, but I think by the end of it, we got a real willingness to work together and collaborate more. And it was discussed that a website to host. So I think what Brett Painter was talking about earlier with the HH work and the modelling and the different process that they've used there. What we're talking about here is more of an on-farm component of that. So we would follow a similar process in terms of getting information. One of the examples used on Friday was there's modelling being done where it didn't need to be modelled. The data actually existed. It was historical data that had been gathered. So we need to avoid really important historical data being lost. So if we put together a library of information here specific to Mid-Canterbury, AgResearch has the 70 years of Winchmore data, the Landcare Research crowd. I mean, they're doing quite good studies, but they don't have a farmer-facing arm. They just sort of talk to the MPI and the regional councils of the world. So we would go out and talk to all of those groups, those key groups, and then we would get possibly a PhD student, or maybe with some of that historical reference stuff, a master's student, to help us collate it and the vehicle for how we would present that to the wider community would be through a website or a desktop or some sort of technology that's a little bit interactive. And some of the figures around what that would cost in the initial stage would be around well, that's why we asked for the 5,000 last time, but around the 10,000 mark, with the view to when we put our bigger funding application in a few months' time into MPI to enable us, that would then pick up the overflow of how much this project's actually going to cost.
Okay. Ian, have you got a question?
More a comment, Bill, when Angela's finished. Yeah.
I think I'm done, Ian. Any help? Because you were there. So
So I just reflect that at the meeting there was quite a lot of concern that the request, the concept was to collect data and information without being specific about what data and information was required. And if you get, if you're not focused enough on what information you actually need, this could turn into a very large black hole, which will suck in vast amounts of money and not actually deliver anything out the other end. So I think there was some very strong recommendations, which I didn't quite read in Andrew's letter to the Zone Committee, saying that for this project to go ahead, you'd need to be very focused on the information you need to actually assist those things that various people are trying to do within this district. We don't need to relitigate all the science or even, in fact, a lot of the raw data is unintelligible to most of us in layman's language. So you have to be very careful with what it is that you're trying to achieve with this sort of collating of information type project.
Yes, thank you, Ian, and I acknowledge my summary of Friday is brief, and you did right with what you're saying. So there's been a bit of backwards and forwards post that meeting, bit of a debrief. So, and I think the point we need to be really clear on is we're probably not talking data, we probably are talking information. So reports and some of that sort of stuff, but not necessarily the data. So not having to go as deep into that. So, and again, it's the terminology. It's encouraging our scientists to think like farmers and farmers to think like scientists and bring the two closer together. So it's very early days, but what we achieved on Friday was actually getting everyone in the same room and starting that conversation. And I think post that, what we got was that there is a willingness to advance it, but we haven't between Friday and now been able to fully form what advancing it looks like.
So I mean, look, and I had a quick chat to Shirley Hayward from ECAN after the meeting, but it seems to me that ECAN's got a substantial amount of information about what's going on in terms of water quality and water quantity and things, if that's the focus, if that is the focus. Where we wouldn't ever claim to have the information is on individual farms. So if Chris Allen wants to measure the water quality coming into his property and his effect on the water quality, and therefore measuring the water quality going out of his property, ECAN hasn't got that fine, that detail, that level of detail. And so it would seem to me that, I guess, that for your group, that if you can focus on what it is, what's the information you need. If the Foothills Catchment Group wants to understand what's required of them, and by doing that, and as a starting point, understanding, water quality coming into their area and leaving their area, that might, that's useful. ECAN will have some basic information on that, and then ECAN can help advise them as to what's a useful information to add to that or collect to that, and where other sources can be. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you're focused on what it is you need, because you're focusing on the outcomes you're looking for and then working back to saying what information do we need to get there, rather than starting out with the position that what information is there out there and therefore that might guide us as to where we want to go. I think understanding your outcomes and working back is better than starting sort of with a mash of information and trying to work forward.
Okay, thanks, Ian. It'll be interesting just to see what the committee thinks. So, and I know it's difficult on some of these web things to get your hand up or whatever, but I'll pick on someone. So Sydney, I'll pick on you because you've got a science background. Do you sort of understand where they're heading with this? Do you think it's a good idea that we need to get this science base together, or do you think it's a little bit not quite teamed up enough, or not quite enough wrap rounds at where it's going?
Well, I was actually thinking about this because with my research and all the information I need to gather, I spend a lot of time making connections and trying to talk to people to get the information I need. And honestly, if that information was all in one place, like Angela is suggesting, that would make life of us researchers a lot easier. So, for example, just I trying to figure out all the land use in the past 10 years and nitrate budget and all that stuff. And to get to that information from farmers, you need to actually have a connection with the farmers, because it's no one that's going to go to a farmer and say, oh, give me your data, and they're going to give it to you. You know that there has to be a relationship, there has to be an objective behind there. And being part of this committee is one link, but you need more. And having everything in one place would be very beneficial. Now, like ECAN has a lot of data as well, but even with all my background, it's really hard to actually access and make, sense of it. And if you don't go and talk to, like, for example, now I'll go and talk to Brad or to go to talk to Matt Dobson about it. I had that connection, but many people don't, and it's hard to make those links. So I think it's very useful. It would be, if it done well, would be very, very helpful. I don't know if I explain all it's in my head, but
I think no, you've explained it well. I think I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, from our perspective, that's a real-time example of what it is we're trying to achieve. So Sydney's put it better than I could have ever. Thank you.
James, Megan, have you got your head around this?
Yeah, I think I raised this last week as well, as I just wondered whether this is something that really ECAN should be doing themselves as a public body and as a holder of this information. They should at the very least have everything, every bit of research, every bit of I guess constructed data, so not raw data, but every bit of data that can be put into in a format which is readable and accessible should be made available through them in the first instance. And then I think someone like your group, Anne, should be able to leverage off that and use their infrastructure and their resources to build on that. So yeah, that would be where my thoughts would be heading, would be to try and pressure ECAN to be making this available in the first place, and then see what else is out there. Because I guess in the other bits of research are coming through universities and private organisations, and whether or not you need to go down that route first. Yeah, that's probably where I'm at the moment, Bill.
Yeah, that sounds good. Who have we still got on from ECAN, Dave? Is Chris or someone there that can speak to what James has talked about?
I'll happily throw Chris under that bus. Here you go, Chris.
Thank you. That's why I'm a reasonably sized man. There is, Helen Shaw has been leading a project that is specifically around exactly what James has been talking about, of ensuring that data has become information and is available for people to use. Helen was involved in the process, which I think you guys have talked to as well, is that the Know Your Catchment work that was done further south, used to be Irrigation New Zealand, but it's now the Waitaki Irrigation Collective, who are looking after the website. So yes, it's something ECAN are aware of and are trying to get to the point where they can make information available for people. So it's actively being done, James, but it's a very good point.
And Chris, if I can just add, we're putting, I think it's several $1 million a year into upgrading our data base on all this, on anything to do with water and water quality and that sort of stuff, and that's all publicly accessible when the system's working properly. And I'm not smart enough to know whether the system's working properly, James. I'm probably the wrong generation, but we've certainly, I think in our long-term plan, there's millions of dollars going into this to complete the project, and so that we have this super sized, super friendly database to do exactly what you described. just at what stage it is, you need to probably talk to Helen Shaw to get that sort of level of detail so you can understand the answer.
So, and if you obviously you've listened to what Chris has said and James, and what I'm getting out of that, they say there is a bit of a background information already in ECAN. It just needs to be teased out. And is that what you're finding, or what's your comment to that?
Look, to a degree, lots of gaps, and I think Shirley Hayward, who was there on Friday, would be happy to admit that they've got the Lawa site. But again, John Ward did a bit of a research prior to his presentation on Friday, and he can find some of it, but not a lot of it. Some of it's still sitting in shoeboxes. I think ECAN aside, because I do take that point on, Aqualink, for example, they're doing work with lysometers, ag research. So it is about the water, but it's very much about the soil also. So we would be more holistic in the type of information that we're getting. So it is about the land management. It's across the board, becoming that sort of hub that's useful for all of the questions. So and in a way, we're going to have to, by doing this, we're going to be able to tell our own story. We're going to be able to get a better understanding of where we've come from. So give the story context, have a good look at where we're at now, and then paint a vision going forward of where it is that we need to be focusing. And we're going to have to do that as part of our funding strategy and our overall strategy for the Catchment Collective anyway. But we're finding, as we're trying to pull all that information together, it would be useful while we're doing this exercise to actually, while we're pulling it together, have a place to put it.
Dave?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. A couple of things. Helen Shaw has given presentations to the Lower Waitaki Zone Committee recently on that project, and I think it would be worth me seeing if I can get her to come along to a Zone Committee meeting, and also perhaps to talk to the Mid-Canterbury Catchment Collective as well. It is a massive project, and then it's still underway, but they're making really good gains, so I think it'd be good for everyone to have an overview of where that's at. And the other thing I'm just wondering about is whether, in terms of money, whether it is worth trying or thinking about giving the Catchment Collective money to actually scope up what the needs are for a start, rather than trying to figure out what the whole thing is and asking for a pot of money for that. Because a smaller amount of money this financial year to scope it up and then figure out what we're doing from there. That's just one option.
That's a good point. Jen, have you got a comment? Jen on or not?
Yeah, hi, sorry. Got my hands full a bit with BlackBerry at the moment. Just from the comments that have been made within the discussion, so my first question would be, how time critical is this? Because it sounds like there is something already going on with ECAN, and that maybe getting together and trying to collaborate on that, perhaps. Yeah, it just sounds like it could be repeating stuff that's happening. So I'm wondering what the time critical nature of it is, and whether it can be some work done to see if it can work in with what's already happening, and having quite a bit of money spent on it already at the moment by the sounds of it.
Have you got a reply to that?
No, so having Shirley there on Friday, we were looking at the parts that ECAN will have, very much so, and she talked about that program that they're developing, but we also identify the parts that they won't have. So we're quite mindful, and collaboration is obviously extremely important. For example, if this is the information you're looking for, here is a link to the ECAN site. So we're not going to replicate that on there, but be able to give people the direction of where they head for it. But if this is the information that you're looking for, here's some other bits. So some of it will be providing hyperlinks, and some of it will be using geospatial technology from other companies. And in the case of ECAN maps. But it is, even though they've got a piece of the puzzle, there are also some really significant parts that they're missing, and that's where we'd focus.
Okay, James, have you got a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Ange, did she have a prototype in mind, or is there another community group in a different area that has done a similar thing that you could point us to as to what you're imagining the end product looks like? Because that may help us figure out how big is this project going to be and what do you need. I think Dave's probably got a good idea, is maybe we do need to offer up some initial funding so you can further scope out what it'll actually all look like. Will it be a simple few pages with, yeah, you're right, resource links to ECAN's databases and research papers and various university research papers, and I don't know, you might have links to the members of the groups that join your meeting on Friday and their the papers and research that they've done. Do you have any ideas on that?
One of the person who's running this for our team, Phil Everest, who presented at the last meeting, so he's gone and spoken to a crowd in Christchurch. They've got the examples of it. I didn't get the name of it, but yeah, we could definitely come back. It's called a desktop, and I know it's been done in other places, so we could find those examples and share that. Absolutely.
Well, I'm thinking, James, I'm thinking along the lines of what Dave said, and you're sort of halfway there. Do you want to move a motion on that sort of, is more like a scoping initial research, isn't it? It's initial, what would you call it? Background or initial scoping of what we're looking for. Is that the right word or not?
Yeah. Do you have a dollar figure in mind, Ange? If we were to move something like that, what would be helpful?
So for us to engage properly with the consultant that does this sort of work in Christchurch, look, even if we could get him for, I don't know, 10 hours to help us and to move this forward. So last time that 5,000 that we put around it, that was us having a pretty good look at how could we turn it into something that maybe we could give a visual presentation to you guys and talk to the other groups, go back to the scientists and check with them, this is where we're at, are we on the right track, get some really constructive feedback. So 5,000 was the figure.
It's up to you, James.
Oh, does anyone else have any thoughts too?
Claire, have you got any comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, agreeing that it's important that we get this information. So a $5,000 investment in that seems reasonable to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a general feeling. So I think you can come up. Oh, hang on, we've got a question, have we? Has someone got their hand up?
Stuart.
Oh, Stuart.
Sorry to be a bit doubtful, but the zone committee is sort of veering off a bit to what I think its basic has always been. I mean, we spent 30,000 last time on this type of thing. We're going to spend all our money on this type of thing rather than what I think is more base zone committee type work. I listened to Ian. I thought Ian had more idea. Because we spend 5, that'll just about be the end of our money for the year. And what have we actually, it's all sort of into the 30 and the 5, and to me it's all the same type of project. So is that the way the zone committee want to go, is it?
Well, it'll be interesting to see what Ian thinks, because Ian, you're a councillor. Do you think ECAN should be doing some more heavy lifting on this, or do you think what James is talking about and Ange, there is a space for us there to make the 30,000 that we've already spent, this little bit of money could help and make it even more worthwhile? What's your feeling?
Well, look, I came away from that meeting, and I know some of the others did from the meeting that Ange is reporting back from, thinking that the concept needs a bit more work on it. And my personal view is that, and I guess it's my ECAN view, is that, but I'm not an expert on this, is that Ange and her team need to be sitting down with Tim Davey and, you know, the head of science at ECAN, and actually saying, you know, that they need to have a view as to what the information they're looking for is, and then B is where are the gaps in the stuff that ECAN can supply. what are the gaps in the information that ECAN has, and then when you got that, when you got that nailed, then you're going to have a view as to what the project actually looks like. And at this stage, I think you've got a sort of an idea out there which is it's a niche that needs scratching, but you're not quite sure what you're looking for, and you're not quite sure what the project looks like. That's my interpretation of what Phil was discussing at the meeting the other day. And I'm not saying you're wrong, but what I'm saying is I think it needs refinement, and you need to work with the repository of, probably the high proportion of the sort of information you're looking for, which is ECAN in the first instance, to help you refine what it is you're looking for.
Yeah, I think
once you've done that, come back to the zone committee if it's appropriate for funding. Yeah,
I think what you make a lot of sense here, and listen to what you're saying too, Stuart. And things have moved away a bit from where we first on the zone committee, these funding streams. But we're sort of through our financial year, so I mean, there's only another month or so to go, and then we're into the next slot. And I've got a feeling, a bit like the way James is heading, but maybe we give a commitment to underwrite the project to a certain amount of money while Ange goes around and has this meeting, as Ian suggested, with Tim Davies, knowing that we'll underwrite the project if there isn't a real need for it. But if it turns out that you think ECAN should be doing that work, or you don't need so much, you need a bit more, we can then discuss it. But we'll just give you some surety that there is some money there if it is appropriate. I don't know what everyone thinks of that.
Sounds pretty reasonable to me.
Yep, good approach.
So, Bill, do we set aside a figure to agree on at the next meeting?
Yeah, we set aside a figure. So Ange has got it in the back of her head when she's following through this project. Well, I've got this money here if it reaches the what she's going to recommend back, or I'm not quite sure how we actually run the rule over it, but I am saying that we set aside a figure, yes.
I see Sydney's got her hand up, and I mean, she would be, if she was willing to, fantastic to work with us on that, because as a potential user, her input would be really valuable.
Okay, Sydney, it's for a shot.
Well, I think all the comments are really valuable here. The one thing that I would like that people keep in mind is that this information is going to be very territorial. It's Ashburton, and when it's done by the people that actually live in the community, it's for them, it's relevant, it's going to be way better done than, for example, if we just leave up to ECAN, which, they look after a large territory. Yeah. And I think the willingness to give information, I'm talking about like from the point of view of farmers, would be more than if it's something like that's coming from the collective, then if it's coming from ECAN. I don't know. I could be wrong, but that's just out there for us to think about it.
We're all sort of dancing around the subject. I think we're virtually on the same wavelength. I think we just we get on with it. So, have you thought of a motion? Have you, James? Sorry.
Yeah, I'd be happy to move that we ring fence, say, half of what's left. So that would be 4,000. Yeah. For this project, conditional on, I guess, agreeing on accepting an updated proposal next meeting, Angela, if that would work for you.
Yep.
And then that leaves us, I guess, 4,000 left for maybe another project to come through next month at possibly the last meeting we consider these things for. And if we don't get anything else, then that maybe give us some more flexibility to further fund what you might need, Ange.
Yeah, sounds good.
So the motion would be to, I guess, ring fence $4,000 aside for the name of the project, which I don't have in front of me, conditional on an updated proposal and approval at the next meeting.
That sounds good. Have you got that written down, Dave?
Community Engagement Fund.
Yeah, the CWMS Community Engagement Fund.
Have you got that, Dave Moore?
Yes, I have, and I'm hoping Carol will as well.
Oh, Carol, of course, sorry.
I've got that.
Whoops.
Okay. Have we got a seconder for James's motion? Was that you, Claire? Did you second it?
Yeah, I can second it.
Thank you, Claire. All in favour? Aye. Well, just put your hands up if you're not. No hands are up. So that's carried. Okay. Thanks, James and Angela. That's good.
Thank you.
So just on the just going back to the MAR presentation from Brent, I think we were all pretty impressed with what's going on there and the technology they're using. That's more for going forward for next year, I think, and you know, we might look at doing a field trip to look at the sites, and we just don't want to lose sight of the presentation they've given us. So and it sort of fits into what we're trying to do within the Mid-Canterbury, Rangitata, Hikio Plains, looking after resources, depleting the nitrogen, all those sort of things. So I think we've got that agenda, Dave. You've got a calendar in front of us, and maybe we can work in through that and build MAR into either a workshop or a field trip, and then we can talk about funding. Is everyone happy with that? Is that where we should go? I see Artie's got a question. Artie?
Yeah, I was actually going back with about the ECAN annual plan and specifically the flood rates change.
Yeah.
And I've been seeing some confusion from the public in terms of the new flood rates. In fact, the document itself from ECAN is a bit contradicts itself, because it says in some cases areas with higher stress proposed would be Racecourse Road and Wakanui Creek, and in the table they actually say showing that the rates will be reduced. So a lot of people are don't really understand why some regions see a significant increase, like Hampstead, and the very areas that we've heard during the last floods that had issues like Racecourse are seeing a decrease in their rates, in the flood protection rates.
So Bill, I can answer Artie's question, but do you want to deal with the other issue first?
Yeah, all right, Artie, we'll hold your question, which is fine. And so what do we feel about the MAR presentation and going forward? How would you like to handle that, everyone?
I think field trip would be great, I think, Bill, if there's a good date.
Yeah. Well, I see, Dave, in your calendar you've got June. Will that weather-wise, that'll be all right, do you think?
I've got no idea on what's best time to look at MAR stuff, but yeah, advice from others. Ian,
have you got an opinion on, or Stuart?
I don't think it matters in terms of time of year, other than you know, we'll be standing out there. I think the weather on the day is more important than the time of the year.
Yeah, you could have a beautiful day. You never know.
Well, I think we'll get together, Dave, when we set the agenda and just work out when we think the best time will be. But we'll put MAR on the field trip agenda, and then we'll talk about their funding when we've had a look at what's going on. If everyone's happy with that, okay. Yeah. So Artie, Ian, can you answer Artie's question, please?
Yeah. Look. In simple terms, Artie, if you look, it's not about those areas that actually got flooded in the last flood, and it's actually not specifically about the last flood. It's actually about the flood. It's the potential to be damaged, to have property damage, if there were no stop banks on the Ashburton River. And there are two major stop banks on the Ashburton River. One is the one that comes down on the north side of the North Branch to protect, to keep the river from flooding down through the Ashburton town itself, and the other is the Valletta stop bank by State Highway 73, is it? Which protects the south side of the South Branch to a large extent. And then there are some smaller stop banks within Green Street to try to contain, which are less effective, but designed for smaller river flows to try to keep the river in the flood, but in the river bed, but to stop it going out over into Ashburton. So the reclassification isn't about anything to do with the last flood as such. It's to say, is your property protected by the river protection infrastructure that's there now? And if the answer is yes, to what extent are you at risk should that infrastructure not be there? And so in the discussion document, there's a coloured diagram showing there are 6 areas now with different weightings describing the risk of those properties as high, medium, or low, roughly. I'm abbreviating, and so this reclassification of the river rating is saying, well, if you're in the high area, you're going to pay that proportion should pay such a percentage, X percentage of the whole river rate money collected. So it is relatively complicated, but what has been proposed is a flattening of the rate per $100,000 of capital value, and there are some big percentage increases in Ashburton, and there are some small, and there are also some reasonably substantial percentage reductions within the town. So it's not a urban versus rural. It's a re-rating depending on where you are. So Lakewood, the rating values will go down, and most of Allenton they're going up, and in Tynwald they're going up because that's actually been brought in for the first time. And some of the percentages look quite large. So I think parts of Allenton have a 400% river rating increase.
And Hampstead 660. Yeah.
Percent.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you translate that into dollar terms, it's very small numbers of dollars. So Hampstead, I didn't know it was quite as high as that, but I'm not arguing with you. It'll be going from something like $10 to $60. And the question that you have to ask yourselves is, if you weren't protected by the flood bank, would you get insurance for your house? And the answer is the insurance companies are now assessing properties depending on their flood, their vulnerability to flooding. And if the cost and if they think the risk of being flooded is too high, they're now either charging super premiums or they're not going to insure at all. They flagged that. They haven't done that yet, but that's what they're moving towards. Now, if you're paying, let's say, I saw one rating demand for Allenton. I think they've gone from, I think it was $23. It was quite a valuable house, to $111 or something for the targeted river rate alone. $111 for an $800,000 house for insurance from being flooded on a regular basis is pretty cheap insurance. And even the houses in Hampstead you're talking about, where they may be facing a 600% increase in their targeted river rate as opposed to their general ECAN rate, it'll still be, I'd be surprised if anybody in town is paying much more than $100. Certainly down in Hampstead, they won't be paying much more than $100 a year for that level of protection. And so I would encourage you guys you're talking to, Artie, to look at the dollar amounts rather than the percentage increases. And it's a protection from flooding, not the damage that was done in this last flood, if you get the difference between that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's what I want to go back to. The people approach me and answer that to them.
And look, if they'd like to have a session with me on this, I'm more than happy to come and meet with them to have that discussion, to make sure that they understand what we're proposing, Artie.
Okay, that would be great.
So give me a call if you'd like me to do that.
That was a good summary, Ian, and a good question, Artie. Stuart.
Yes, Artie, there's actually a mistake in the ECAN annual plan. We all got those maps with the colours and the zones we were in under the new regime. But if you look up, I think it's page 80 in the ECAN annual plan, they haven't got the right categories, A, B, C, D, E, F. They've got the previous year's rating amounts for, the areas are completely and utterly different. You can use the example by dividing it, and I know we're over in Tynwald, we end up at $9.33 per 100,000 valuation, but ECAN have not got that in the annual plan, so it's a missed that out. So anybody should be able to look at his valuation and look at the category they're in as far as the colour goes, multiply the two together, and they'll end up with their rates. It's just sort of an omission for some reason.
Oh, so you're saying the example table may not be accurate?
No, the example in the discussion document is accurate, but I think, Stuart, you're referring to the bigger document, aren't you? Where there was a table where they messed it up.
Yes. You should be able to look at the big document, the 300 page, find the right page where it says orange G or whatever it is $5 per 100,000 capital value on your property, so anybody can work it out. But they've actually missed that table out. So you have to go by the examples they give you. The trouble is the examples are fairly wide. I mean, they give Ellington an example of 635, I think, for a house value. Well, it could be everything from 300 to $1 million. You just sort of have to divide what you think your valuation is compared to what the example is.
Yeah. But in the discussion, in the briefer discussion, the summary discussion document, I'm pretty certain the tables are right in that.
That's great. Thanks for bringing that up. I don't know how we're straight into rates. I'm not quite sure if it's a zone committee thing, but I think, Artie, when you get asked questions like that, it's good that you can give an answer back. So good on you for bringing it up. Dave, are we sort of pretty tidied up? What else have you got to bring up?
Just looking at the schedule for the next few meetings, just some things to highlight. 29th of April, we'll be starting the applications. We'll be opening for the Zone Committee refresh. So I think it's you, Bill, and Jen, isn't it? I think that are up for a refresh.
Yeah.
Looking at doing the appointment workshops in June.
So refresh, does that mean when we're exhausted, we go to Hamden for a couple of days or something?
Yeah, I think so. And we'll better put that into the budget somewhere, I think.
We've got $4,000 left, haven't we?
Yeah, should be
You're
right.
overseas now, Bill.
You should go to Methven now to try the new pose in Methven.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Cool,
that's a great idea. Andrew, have you got a quick question in there? Sorry, I missed you.
Oh, that's all right, Bill. I just have a correction on Dave's report with the CWMS Regional Committee. Dave just put that the co-chairs were appointed. And the Runanga, the Ngaitahu one hasn't yet been appointed. So that is where the hold up is. So I just thought maybe a correction of that. So yes. One of the chairs was appointed, but the other one, they're still going through the nomination stages. So that was, I just wanted to...
Should have been a bit clearer there. Yeah, there's an interim co-chair of Jan Cramwell. So yeah, that until we have the Ngaitahu one confirmed, you're right. Thanks, Ange.
Okay, carry on, Dave.
So also on the bottom row of that table, it's just put in there. Not trying to highlight you, Ian, but it was highlighted to me from internally within ECAN that there are a few clashes with Ian's councillor schedule. So just put them in the bottom there, and sometimes when Ian may not be available, whether we may want to have a workshop or something different. I'm not sure what your feeling is, Ian, about that.
Oh, well, my priority might be to come to the Zone Committee, not go to the other meeting. So no, I wouldn't get. Let me sort out the clashes and the importance of where I should be. Don't you worry about it, and don't rely on the governance team in Christchurch either. I'll make those decisions.
Okay.
So cool. you set your own schedule regardless of my timetable and get on with it, and I'll try to be where I think I should be.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you for that. April, we will have the Hindstrains Working Party recommendations. So Donna Lil and Maria from the Zone team are going to come and talk to the review of those recommendations. I think that'll be really interesting for everyone, giving us a bit of a picture of where we've got to there. I think it'd be important for us, and we've established we'll be talking about the proposal from the Mid-Canterbury Catchment Collective, so that 5K, so we'll hopefully have another more clear proposal for that. So I think rather than a workshop, we probably need a proper meeting in April. May, at the moment, perhaps a workshop may suffice if we're just refining our budget. I'm not sure we can make that call after April. And then we can look at perhaps in June. I'll talk to Brett Painter about field trip and when that would be most suitable. And then as we get into July, we'll have the changing over and then the induction of new members. So August will kind of be where we're starting to hit our straps, as well, start off as a bit more of a slightly changed committee, be looking at our budget and what we're going to do for that next year. And then we're going to have a bit of a hiatus in September and October when we've got council elections on. So we won't be meeting in those months, and then it just leaves November for this year. So August, probably July, August is going to be quite important for setting the direction. Then we're going to have a bit of a break, and then that'll be kind of winding up in November. So that's sort of just how it's looking at the moment. It's pretty loose sort of program, but we can refine it. One question I have for Jen is, are we still looking at Matariki planting in June for Wakanui?
Hopefully, yes. But I'll have to check. We had a postponement of the last meeting we were going to have with the Wakanui crew. So, yeah, I'll have to report back to you on that.
Cool. Well, we've got plenty of time.
And Jen, you know, you've got some funding there for some of those plantings.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll be trying to source them from somewhere else first. But if I can't manage to do that, then I will tap into that funding.
Cool.
Okay.
That's all from me.
Well, that was good, Dave. So we're about to close the meeting. Is there any business or that anyone else would like to bring up about any other matter other than rates?
Bill, just in terms of the Dave flagged that he was going to have a report on the Hines working party, the Hines, what do you call it, working party, James working party.
Yeah.
Craig Fleming is the chair of that, so he will be included in that, will he?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ian.
Yeah. Okay, well, if James, if you'd like to close the meeting, please.
Yep, kia ora. Kia tātou katoa, te ata whau tō tātou ariki e hukarati. Me te araha te atua, me te whiwhinga taitanga ki te wairo tapu, ake, amen.
Amen, thank you. Thanks for everyone's participation, and have a good week or month. See you all. Bye.
Ka kite. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.